This is Joe Madres, and can you spell your first and last name for me?
Yep, Joe, Joe. Madres is Madres.
Okay, and the reason we do that is because we might think we know how to spell it, but they know better. So you're a teacher here at Outdoor Academy in Art.
Right.
I'm going to drill right down into something, and I think when we look at education, what do you see as the importance of art as it relates to the whole child?
I see art as a subject that interacts with all the other fields in a way that people rarely seem to understand. When I was in high school, I sort of got really into philosophy, and I kind of see art as a more physical form of philosophy, at least the way I practice it. There's always a concept behind my actions, and through the process of using the materials, it's a form of discovery. And a lot of times art gets put into the category of self-expression, but for me, and what I try to do in my classes is bounce back and forth between, giving the kids a basis in technique, obviously, so that they have that ability they have that visual vocabulary, but also it's a way to just kind of freely explore the world in a way that they can't do with other subjects.
Can you give me a couple of examples of that tie to philosophy? And then the second thing was how they learned to not self-express, tie it into...
Right.
Okay, go ahead.
Well, for example, the first project I've done with my 8th graders is the architectural drawing project with use of perspective. And so with perspective, obviously there's really cut and dry, step-by-step techniques you need to follow to create the illusion of depth on a flat surface. And that's a very basic, traditional thing that artists do. But to take that to a conceptual level and understand how we as individuals have one perspective on reality, and then how that changes based on your vantage point, and then to think of the vantage point as an analogy for personal experience. And so that all ties together. So you have the idea of, perspective being your reality and being warped by where you stand physically, where you stand experientially. And so then they start making all the connections with, perspective and that kind of thing is discussed in the humanities. And now that we're finished with the projects, and I'm particularly impressed with the work this semester, we're going to watch Inception, which again goes into that idea of layers of experience relating to actual layers of a building, relating to creating your own world from nothing. So relating to, creating your own dream world from nothing versus creating your own internal world from experience. And
these are lessons adults struggle with.
Exactly.
I mean, that's heuristics. How do I engage people around me based on my own experience? And so what when you're working with 8th graders, what surprises you?
Their ability to understand those kind of concepts that I'm trying to get at them really, really surprises me. And,
can you give me an example?
Well, some of the kids, just what they have done with the project. I mean, I give them criteria like, okay, you're going to start with a central building. You're going to draw a picture as if you're standing on the corner of a block, and you're going to be looking across the intersection at other buildings, and you're going to see the roads stretching into the distance, and go from there. And some of them are like, well, I'd rather do a picture where there's one older building and it's surrounded by a bunch of modern buildings. And so you get the idea that this one building is sort of trapped in its own time and it's being encroached by modernity, or some just go completely surreal and they turn buildings into like a giant hot dog or an inverted pyramid, or really creative things.
And it surprises you.
Well, I mean, it does. It's a very good surprise.
It surprises me.
Yeah.
Because
they do things right. I give them a lot of times the kid, if they are given some structure, they're like, okay, I'm gonna just stick with that, so I know that I'm gonna get an A or that I'm not gonna do something wrong. And you get those kids, and I try to push them out of that idea that there's something, you can do something wrong with this process. But then you have some of the kids who just so immediately want to do their own thing, and which I think is great.
Stop. Do you see that thread? What did he say that was unusual or surprising?
That they want to do their own thing and don't want to, they want to branch off.
Okay.
Not
That they would turn it into something else.
Okay, so we live in this environment that we've all created, and it's supposed to be doing the right thing always. But what Joe is saying is, I'm trying to get them to move out of that. What are some of the barriers to that? Because these kids are pretty much told this is the right way to do things, and this isn't. So this is, my guess is it's attacking or encouraging a whole different part of the brain.
Right.
How do you get a pleasing kid to open up and try to push that boundary? And then I want to ask you the second part of that question. How does that relate to the other things they're learning in other classes?
Right. Well, I try to address that right off the bat in the class. The whole idea of failure not being an option, and how in the arts, and really in any field, if you're trying to do something great, do something new, failure is a necessity. And they kind of hear that as, you know, a little catchphrase sometimes, you know, with inspirational speakers, like failure leads to success, and that, but they don't know what that means. So I'm in my class, I try to really show them what that means, and that they're going to have to fail in this process to get a good product. And even if, you know, even if the product doesn't end up being finished, because I try to tell them it's not a product-oriented class. It really is about that process of, all right, I followed these steps, and now I understand that, but now I want to try to push it and actually use the technique of perspective to do my own thing. And all right, here I tried that. Oh, that doesn't work. So now I've learned that series of steps doesn't lead anywhere that I want. And you can call it failure, or you can just call it step 1, step 2. But I really try to get them to understand that, you know, in a class like art, to really discover and do new things, you can't just follow a set of steps that have already been put in front of you, because you know that's going to lead somewhere technically correct, but it's going to lead somewhere that we've all been before.
Can you give an example of a student who maybe kept hitting up against that, and not giving a name, but just what happened on the outcome?
Let's see. There's a couple. What did I have? I guess more outside of my 8th grade class in ceramics, it's an issue a lot where, for example, the potter's wheel. It's actually.
It's a great example, isn't it? Because it's so technically difficult.
It's basically, I tell them, like, this isn't really a creative activity right now, at least at the beginning. It's extremely technical. And to go back to your idea about those particular students who are pleasers and have been either taught or have internalized the idea that failure is not an option, and I tell them, you know, you're probably going to fail the first time. You might fail the second, third time. You know, I'm going to give you all the steps. I'm going to show you what position to put your body in. I'm going to try to relate my experience of working on the wheel as much as I can for you, but you haven't ever experienced it. It's a kinesthetic thing, which again is not something, you know, your use of your body. It's a lot more their experience in athletics than it is in other classes. So before they actually experience that kinesthetic, you know, relationship between the wheel and the clay and themselves, there's no way they're going to know what is going to be the outcome, what it's going to, you know, what the process is going to be like. So
I love that example.
Yeah.
I love that example. So you have a kid sitting down at the wheel. They're frustrated. I've done it, so I know.
Yeah.
They'll be going in and go, boom.
Yeah.
You know, what happened? I have no control over this. And then you find your controls. You find your small adjustments. You have some of the kids on the other end produce something really that they could not have anticipated, that isn't maybe so simple or so balanced or so clean, but is creative on the other side.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, what I try to get the kids to do is impress themselves. I mean, we do have a culture of student impressing teacher,
Uh-huh.
and I do also have that surprise on the other side of the kids who, you know, they want to do well, but they don't necessarily, their goal is not to impress me.
Uh-huh.
And so I'm making sure that they're impressing themselves, that they're doing something that, because I also have those kids who, you know, don't care so much about the technical side, or they'll have they might already have a specific idea and they just want to attack it, and then, you know, which is kind of more the way the artist that I am, where I have a concept in mind and I'm trying to realize it, but you know, then that's when the learning comes in, because here's my vision, and then I start the process, and then the reality at the end is obviously different from that, and then I have to figure out, okay, why, what were the limitations, what was my shortcoming in understanding the material, the process, and so that's when the learning comes in.
Okay, I'm gonna hand it over to you guys. So Sarah, you wanna come sit in my seat, will you start? And go for a few minutes, and then we're gonna talk as a group about what story ideas, because this interview, one you need to run with. You need to take it from me or work with me, because I heard 4 stories come out of this conversation, wonderful stories that I think both of you can write. Okay, Sarah, hop in. I will help you, don't worry.
Okay.
Okay. So, go ahead.
Okay, so I'm interested in the whole aspect of you want kids to sort of like challenge like the authority, but like challenge themselves and like challenge what's happening with the art. Does it ever cause issues? Like I know Ms. Martin was asking, like, does it cause issues in other classes? But does it ever cause issues with teachers coming to you saying, I have this kid who used to just listen to everything I do, and now they're sort of challenging me? Is that ever an issue?
That I have not had that direct conversation where my class has affected another student's behavior to the extent where another teacher has had to address it with me. But I have had teachers either praise something that I've done in the class in terms of projects to get the kids to think in a different way. I've also had the teachers complain about a project, but mainly because, and I'm referring to the Earthworks project, because it would make the kids come into class dirty and smelly after my project. But a lot of teachers will come and really be excited about that project because it's so outside of the normal curriculum here. And so with the Earthworks project, the kids will get into small groups, and they are, first we just kind of explore the campus, the natural resources that we have around this campus. And they'll design a structure that either is interactive in some way, either like they're making a hut or some kind of living situation, or they're making something that's interactive. And they design it on paper, and they plan out what materials that they've found around campus that they're going to use. And then with very basic hand tools, they have to build the structure. So it's problem solving, it's, you know, cooperative, and so in those cases, I can get those students that, you know, they're just waiting for that opportunity to be out of the classroom, and that's, I mean, all year long, for the most part, they've been inside. I've been telling them focus, detail oriented, you know, sit down or at most stand up, and you know, the only walking around you should be doing is getting your materials in the classroom. And so I get those students who have kind of been untapped the whole year, and then we get to this project and they're out, like last year and the year before, we were out using that woods that's now sort of blocked off from the construction. So, I mean, there's water back there, people are falling into the mud, people are losing my tools, and I'm telling them to go back and like explore into the woods, and obviously I'm one person and I've got like 20 kids roaming the woods, and some teachers are like, I cannot believe you're doing that, that seems so risky, and I'm like, well, you know, I'm reading all this literature now, and based on my own childhood experience of the woods, like, this is needed, and it's not like I do this without, you know, I send stuff home to the parents, like, here, this is what we're going to be doing, the kids are going to get dirty, they need to bring in hand tools, I'm going to teach them how to use them safely, but
Mm-hmm.
this is the project we're getting into. And so I have yet to have any complaints from parents about that. But I mean, the kids love it, especially those ones that have that tendency to go against authority. Because I was that kid when I was in school, and it amazes people because people think, oh my God, Mr. Madres is so calm, he's so nice. But when I was in school, I had anger issues, and I was very rebellious, and so I was that kid who was like, well, why are we doing it this way? Why don't we try it that way? And so I get that student, and maybe it's my bias because I was that kind of student, but I understand the value of that student, and a lot of the education system does not understand the value of that student. So with projects like that, I'm really trying to get that student to understand that just aimless rebellion and causing problems, causing issues for no reason is not the way to go, but that questioning authority is not necessarily a bad thing.
Do you think that you being that like angry, like defiant child, like in your middle school, high school years, has like developed you into the artist you are today?
Partially. I think it definitely is still part of my personality. I'm still the one who doubts, questions, when I get some, some instruction about some specific procedure I'm supposed to follow, I hardly ever take it at face value, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to do that because I've been told to do that, and it must be correct. So I think just the act of trying to create art to bring new experiences into the world for people, I think that's automatically a rebellious act. It doesn't have to be. The rebellious is always given a negative connotation. It's often given a negative connotation, and I guess what I'm saying is it shouldn't have to be negative. To rebel against a norm is innovation.
Love that.
I love
That's a great quote. I'm going to switch because Kimmy's nodding, and something's hitting her. Funny, right? Okay. Remember, we got it on tape, so.
Lovely.
All right. Okay, go ahead. So something hit you. You're nodding.
So do you think that, so this kind of aspect of you that you have, do you think that's something that you would like to, in a way, teach the students to also emulate? Like there are students that, choose to rebel or choose to question and kind of think of things in a different way other than just doing exactly what they're told on the spot. Do you think that's something that in your teaching you try to, encourage, or you just kind of let it happen naturally?
I kind of a combination, I guess. I don't want students to emulate any specific approach to art or process in thinking about what art is and how it relates to everything else. I especially wouldn't want them to emulate me specifically because I know how difficult I was as a child, and so I know it kind of relates to the other question about, am I causing problems for other teachers? And maybe I am, and it's subtle with the kids who start to question things, especially when I bring in other subjects specifically to my class, and hopefully it matches up with what the other teachers are doing. But what I do, I try to do it as individualistically as I can, where if it's a shy, pleasing child, I try to be like, well, I want you to impress yourself. I want this project to do something that makes you proud, and builds your confidence. And to the more rebellious child, I want to be like, well, I know you can do this. I know you can doubt. I know you can question. I know that you can use the materials in a way that's sometimes inappropriate and makes a huge mess. So I want you to go this way, and I want you to go this way, and I don't want everyone to meet in the middle. I want everyone to be able to experience that continuum, of approaches, so that really, I guess it's building empathy, which is another really important part of the arts. Is that empathy being, the reason why we're doing this is, one, for us to understand our world better, and two, to understand each other better, and it's just another way to share experience that
Right.
can't really be done in quite the same way with other fields.
Mhm.
So
Have you seen, so as you're talking about like kind of that student crossover going from one extreme to the other, have you seen that in your classes? Or is it something
yeah.
you have yet to?
actually, with the Earthworks project again, I've seen that where, I'll get kids, boys and girls, who go out there and they're like, "Ew, I don't want to get my new shoes dirty," or "I don't know how to use a hammer, I don't know how to use a saw," and then I'll get the kids who are, they hunt with their family every weekend, and they're like, "Let me at that. Can I bring my axe? Can I bring my machete?"
That's my kid.
And I'm like, "Well, you can keep your machete at home, but you can show this child how to use a saw properly,
Right.
and then maybe they'll show you how to, be more technically refined on your joints over here."
Right.
And so yeah, I've definitely seen that, and a lot of times I let them form their own groups with that project. Sometimes I choose the groups. It depends on obviously class dynamics, but yeah, I have seen that where the really like super detail oriented student who can never finish a project will be affected by the student who is really gestural and expressive, but could use more detail. So yeah, I think I definitely see that in my class.
We have to close out, but this was awesome. Thank
Thanks.
you. Okay, so you see we went broad philosophy. We drilled down into what you guys were concerned about, which is individuality and expression and growth. I think what might be, we can probably shut off. Oh no, because we can edit. This could be a really great class project to put, if Joe's willing to put it online. I don't know, we have to check with him first. But I think if everybody in the class asked Joe a question or two, you could do it in a print format. You have a podcast already here. You guys did a great job, by the way. And then if Joe would be willing to take some time and ask other people questions in the class, I think you have a nice package about the value of art. And I'd like you guys to maybe talk to him offline. I lost my thread. About art and science, because we have a science lab going in, and I think this is a great opportunity to find out how what's happening in the art class might relate to what's happening in the science class, because he said something about innovation. What was your line about innovation?
Yeah, that rebellion against the norm is innovation.
Is innovation, and rebellion is not used in the traditional sense in this. You guys know that, right? And rebellion is a pushing of boundaries and edges and constrictions. So at the interview, always thank your subject for sitting in the hot seat because it's not comfortable. But you did great. Thank you for being here. You guys did great. You're here a little bit. Think about what kind of question you can ask